Hello world, welcome to the 191st Climate Change Emergency Protest here in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. It is August 5th, 2022. Next week will be the 192nd Climate Change Emergency Protest. I'll be on August 12th, 2022. So I'm standing out here at the John Burns statue. John Burns was an ordinary citizen in Gettysburg, and he heard of the coming Confederates, East Division I think it was, coming from the west, from Cashtown area, to invade Gettysburg with a severe force, a giant force. And he took it upon himself to stand out here with the toe-to-toe against the Confederates with also the Union troops. And what they did is they lined John Burns as a citizen. He was the only one doing this, and it's actually illegal to do this as a citizen, because you're a non-enemy or you're a non-uniform combatant. So it's seen as being a bushwhacker, which could result in immediate execution if you're caught. So he was put over here by these trees with the 7th Wisconsin, I think it was, and the 24th Michigan, who were known as the Iron Brigade. John Burns was born in 1793, so he was 69 years old when he came out here. So he walked a mile out of town to engage in this battle. So he was with 7th Wisconsin, 24th Michigan, the Iron Brigade. He was put in as a sharpshooter. He borrowed a rifle from someone who was injured and was unable to perform his duties anymore during the battle. So he had originally come out with a flintlock musket, and those balls were inaccurate. But he got a modern rifle and with all the cartridges. So they put him behind a tree because he was a pretty good shot, evidently, and he did shoot a Confederate officer off his horse that was approaching quickly towards the troops. John Burns suffered leg, arm, and chest wounds. Some say it was 3 wounds, some say it was 5 or whatever. But what happened was, after the Union fell back a mile to the east here during the battle to Cemetery Ridge and Culp's Hill, he was left behind. They couldn't drag him with them, so he was left behind. The Confederates caught up to him, and what he did was get rid of his rifle and his cartridges, and he said that he was looking for his wife, who was disabled, and he couldn't find her, and that's when he got shot. So they let him go on that issue. They dressed his wounds, and they took him in town, and they put him in a basement under guard, but he crawled away later and ended up in his house that is on, I think, on the corner of West Street and Chambersburg Road, if you look there. It's no longer there, but that is the location of his former house. So he took great risk to himself being a civilian and engaging in battle. And these guys were mechanized killers at this point. I mean, this is a third year of fighting for both the Confederates and the South and the Union, the North. And these guys knew how to kill, and it wasn't some lollygag walk in the forest here. He was up against some mechanized killers, and these guys were just they knew what they were doing. So later on in life, the following year, Matthew Brady came to town right away. Actually, took photos of the Battle of Gettysburg and the location, everything of what happened where. And John Burns was famously photographed on his porch. And then when Lincoln came to town in November to give the Gettysburg Address, John Burns accompanied him from the Wills house up to the Presbyterian Church the day before the ceremony at the battlefield, at the cemetery, Evergreen Cemetery. On a sidebar, John Burns has a flag flying 24 hours a day over his grave, as does Jenny Wade, 2 civilians. Jenny Wade was killed during the battle. She was the only civilian killed during the battle. And the only other person we know of that has a flag flying 24 hours a day is Betsy Ross in Philadelphia. So as far as civilians go. So he walked with Lincoln up to the Presbyterian Church. So what's this have to do with climate change? Well, what it is an example of civilians engaging and doing the best to stem the tide of impending catastrophe. They recognize the consequence of failure by not being proactive as to what's happening, the oncoming storm. He recognized Confederates were coming. If they didn't fight them now, the country would be split in two, and who knows what would result of that. It's just pure chaos in that situation. So climate change is not only a potential catastrophe for humans, but a real good chance of extinction of not only humans, but all life on Earth. Last year, the United States experienced at least 700 deaths, direct deaths, as a result of climate change, and $146 billion in damage in 2021. these are direct issues, heat, floods, such as that, drought. So people are losing stuff right now, and it's not only their lives, but extreme amount of money. So in China, in the last week, you've had Chinese floods and heat waves. In Europe, you have rivers running dry in the most severe drought in decades or years or centuries. I don't know how long. So the rivers in Europe are actually running dry. You should check it out on YouTube. Heat waves, drought begets heat waves, and it does not go away. If it's dry, it's going to get hotter and hotter. Last week or 2 weeks ago, it was 104 in England and 115 in Portugal. Australia is experiencing severe floods in eastern Australia where the fires once were. Iraq yesterday had 50 degrees Celsius, 122 degrees Fahrenheit. They had to shut down a lot of office buildings. West Antarctica runs a real risk of being at a tipping point where Thwaites Glacier is going to be one of the Thwaites Glacier, I think, and Ross Ice Sheet are going to be one of the first to go. And then what happens is that's like a cork in the bottle. Most of West Antarctica is below sea level. So if the ice sheets go, that allows water to get into and go down like into a bowl underneath the main ice sheet, which is anchored to the ground. And that has the potential of raising sea levels up 10 feet around the world, which will be devastating for about everyone in the world. There are 280 million people in south of the Sahara and north of South Africa, 280 million that are in starvation danger, especially in the eastern horn of Africa. In the United States, you had flash floods in Arizona recently, a couple days ago, as a result of debris flow from previous fires. So if the trees burn down and all the vegetation, then rain comes, it just throws all this muck and guck into the rivers, and then it's a debris flow, which is extremely dangerous, can take out entire buildings and things like that. Eastern Kentucky, as you know, had 37 dead during the floods that just recently happened, and not just one town, it's several towns. Towns were destroyed. It was called a 1,000-year event, but they keep having 1,000-year events. So how is that possible? Well, it's climate change is the sole reason behind all this. They keep saying climate change is a contributing factor to the drought, and contributing factor to the fires, and contributing factor to floods and stuff like that. No, climate change is the sole reason. They're pussyfooting around, and they're not giving the real truth as to what's happening. The media is not. Right now, there are 30 large active fires in the United States. The electrical grid in Texas and the Midwest really runs a risk of being going into blackout stage or brownout at the very least. And what's going to happen then is that the air conditioners go off, and then you're going to see massive amount of deaths because temperatures are in 112 degrees, 108 degrees, things like that. And humans cannot survive that. If you look up wet bulb effect, that'll give you an idea of what's happening. Towns running out of water. There's a 1,200-year drought in the United States right now, the worst drought in at least 1,200 years. Lake Mead and Lake Powell, two giant reservoirs, number 1 and 2 in the country, are potentially at dead pool status, eventually coming up, and it's dropping a huge amount of inches per day. There's two giant lakes, and what happens then at dead pool status is there's no electricity going to be generated and no water for the entire West as far as Los Angeles and places like that. So right now, Biden's gotten through trying to get put through the Inflation Reduction Act, which, climate change is not important enough to them to have an act by itself. They don't feel it would fly by on its own. And this is ridiculous that they've not conveyed the truth as to what's happening. And it is extremely the fault of all the politicians, all of them, not just Republicans or Democrats, all of them, that they have not reported and made climate change the first and foremost thing in everyone's mouth. This is ridiculous that people in the West and people in the South and people in Kentucky aren't recognizing that these events are destroying their lives, and the result is it's from climate change. I don't understand the thought process going on. Everyone who's losing their houses and their lives and friends' lives and things like that, not their lives, obviously, but they should be protesting. This issue of climate change is beyond the pale of anything we've ever experienced, and beyond the pale of anything any human has experienced. So what happened with this climate change bill, which is called the Inflation Reduction Act? Biden and his crew just knuckled under to Joe Manchin from West Virginia. One senator and also Sienna from Arizona are the sticks in the mud that can't get this thing put through. No Republicans are voting for it, and this is insanity because the states that are being hit the most with climate change are the western states, and the southern states, which tend to be Republican-oriented. So they're not getting behind this climate change bill. It's insanity what's happening now. So what's happened is that they knuckled under Joe Manchin and his demands, and because they need the vote. And what Joe Manchin demanded, and this is horrific what's going on, what Biden and his crew were willing to do and sacrifice in order to get this climate change bill through. And you can't go one step forward and two steps back. So what they're doing is they're agreed to auction off more land in public land in the Gulf of Mexico. They already just auctioned off 80 million acres. 80 million acres is like Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Maryland, I don't know what all the states combined that I just named in size. I think New York also. So it's a huge amount of land that has been auctioned off already. And they want to auction off more land as part of the agreement for oil drilling rights, sorry. So after the 80 million acres that were auctioned off last fall, now they're going to do more. Also, they're going to allow more drilling in Alaska. So this is ridiculous. Also, they agreed to have a methane pipeline extended through West Virginia. That's called natural gas, but it's nothing but methane, which is the worst greenhouse gas out there. So this is all part of the so-called energy infrastructure, which they term it energy infrastructure repair and things like that. But they're just putting in a new pipeline, which is insanity also. We can't afford to have more carbon dioxide put in the atmosphere. Every time you start up your car, every time you turn on your gas stove to cook, things like that, it just adds more carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. When you add extra drilling and things like that and oil coming out of the ground, we're just absolutely committing suicide and murder of future generations and our generation as well. So they also allow tax credits, allowing coal and gas industry to keep going on with slight reductions in carbon emissions. So they've allowed auction of public lands, they're allowing a methane pipeline, and now they're going to allow the coal and gas industry to keep going on their merry little way as we all die. So we can't allow these types of dirty deals just for the sake of superficial success. What's happening is the Democrats right now want to have some success they can tuck in their pocket, and everyone's like, Jim, you're being negative. No, this is the truth as to what's happening. There's great cost to putting these bills through. Yeah, they're going to get some electric cars out of it and things like that, but it does not outweigh the cost of putting more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. There is no carbon budget. So these are dirty deals done dirt cheap. We need an engaged public that is actually aware of what's happening, and you need to educate yourselves, and you're doing this by listening to this broadcast, but also you need to do your own research on YouTube and go into various places like Environmental Coffee House, Paul Beckwith, Peter Carter, and Sam Carena, Arctic News, different things like that. So we need an engaged public as to knows what's actually happening. There is collusion by the media throughout the world by having close ties to the parties that they choose to tie themselves to. The media is tied to various parties throughout the world. Some groups are tied to Democrats in the United States. Some groups are tied to Republicans in the United States. But we need the stark reality of what's happening and why it is happening. Not just what is happening, but attribute it to why it's happening. And not saying it's climate change is a partial contributor. So climate change is a sole contributor to all these horrific events that's happening. So right now we have governments for hire by the rich and the powerful, and a failed media. And we have a public that is largely and childish vapid of any critical forward thinking. We will not survive, and we will surely go extinct with this continued effort and lack of desire by the public to be engaged, and childish hide away and don't want to hear it and just leave it up to the politicians to do the right thing, which they won't. There are no John Burns. You have to be John Burns. We are all John Burns. We all have to walk out of town and be willing to sacrifice whatever is needed to get this done. You're not only talking about your grandchildren and your children like that. We're talking about our very lives right now. That's how close to extinction we're going right now. What's happening is that Pinocchio is hopelessly entangled by the strings controlled by the puppet master. Pinocchio cannot get out on his own. The politicians are tied to the oil industry and gas industry. Joe Manchin is a millionaire, multi-millionaire as a result of the coal industry. He takes more money from the oil and gas industry than any other politician, and he's supposedly a Democrat. So, you're Pinocchio being entangled by the puppet master. Distraction and manipulation by the media and their political leaders will sooner and not later, lead to the great unraveling of society and a literal hellscape. We're going into a hellscape right now, what's happening. There's nothing positive to say when the engineers of society's train have a hand firmly on the dead man switch. Increasing what the dead man switch is you have your hand on the throttle, and if you let go, it goes even faster. It's increasing the speed of towards the extinction wall, and it's not only the extinction wall, it's our extinction wall. That's where we're headed right now. We all need to be John Burns. We all need to walk out of town and go, you know what? We can't take it anymore. We can't keep going on this way. We need to do what he did and stand out and be willing to take it on the chin and have your friends and family be disgusted by your attitude towards climate change. And I don't understand why they're doing that. Well, you know, you actually have to step out and quit continuing on like things are just normal. They're not. Horrible things are happening right now, not only through the United States, but also throughout the whole world. And please become more worldly. Check out YouTube, check out Environmental Coffee House, check out Paul Beckwith on Facebook, check out Peter Carter on Facebook, Arctic News on Facebook, and please go type in climate change 2022 or just climate change in general, and you'll get an eyeful and earful as to what's happening around the world. So I'll catch you next week. That'll be August 12th. Please do something. Please don't keep going along like everything's normal. Stop doing your vacations and think things are normal. Take your vacations, but look around as to what's happening. Talk to the population that's being engaged and you know, having these horrible things happen to them. And maybe make them aware in their own thing that this is happening as a result of climate change. For some reason, people are unaware that things are happening as a result of climate change. So please do your part, and I implore you to do that. But I'll catch you next week, and I wish I didn't, because this should have stopped at climate change protest number 1. Bye.